What we want ultimately is to have a system that as things come up, we know which way they're going to be funneled, we know which way they're going to go, and it just happens automatically. So I guess I know Jeff did a good job kind of talking to you a little bit about the framework of MTSS, but to me, this is what we're aiming for, is every little dot, every student, every need that comes up, eventually we will be able to say that we have a process for that to address that. Nick, you can go to the next slide. I just want you to take a minute and look at, these are the different groups that have been super influential in some of our MTSS work. There's different teams with different purposes. Obviously, if you're talking tier 1, that's what we do for all students. All of our staff have made an impact at tier 1. But these are the different groups who have really taken up the mantle of the changes that we've made. What you'll notice is that there's lots of different teams, but there's also some overlap in those teams of maybe one person is on a team here and then they're on another one. To me, that is the most exciting thing about this work, is that it's been so driven by our staff. In a time when we talk about staff wellness and we talk about people's ability to take on one more thing, these are our staff members who have really led the charge and who have made some of what we've done their own prerogative. I'd also like to point out at the bottom that we have our student Eagle ambassadors. You'll have a chance in a minute to hear about those too. It's not just about our staff. We've really tried from the very start to make sure that we have student voice in our processes, and you'll see that in a few minutes. Nick, you can advance, thanks. So I'm going to start off, all my slides kind of have the same format. It'll tell you the tier and whether it's academic or social emotional behavioral at the top. And then along the top right, you'll see our strategic plan goals and which ones are specifically linked or which ones are specifically addressed by the slide I'm talking about. So we're going to talk about some of our tier 1 academic changes. At the elementary school, you'll see that little box there that says ES. It means it was an elementary school goal. They wanted to really focus on increasing students in the number of students at the tier 1 level for reading. As a result of that, we have adopted and are implementing Reading Horizons. It is a program that provides direct phonics instruction for students. We were noticing that was an area that our students really needed some help in. One of the really cool things about Reading Horizon is that it automatically provides you with differentiated groupings of students that you can immediately then target their needs based on the instruction that happened that day. So K through 3rd grade, our teachers are using this to help close some of those gaps and to prevent further gaps from happening with our phonics. Nick, go ahead. Another elementary goal was to decide on just one K-5, one math program. So after lots of focused group work, lots of pilot meetings, we have chosen to use illustrative math. We got a consensus from our staff to move forward with that. And one of the interesting things about illustrative math is it really focuses on the development of mathematical thinkers and a focus on math practices. So I remember when I was taught math, this is the way you do it, and this is the way that it's going to get done. Whereas this particular program is very interesting in its flexibility, offering multiple ways for a child to enter into like a math task and use the strategies that they know to attack it the way that they can best. And at the secondary school, they had the opportunity to develop department goals. So what's great about that is the relevancy with which those goals were formed. Because they were developed by departments themselves, they really reflected like the deep needs that somebody like myself might not, I don't know necessarily exactly what the true needs are for the science department. And what we've seen is not just that these are just goals that our staff has set, but they set rigorous goals for themselves. Whether it be to improve Regent scores, whether it be to offer further electives, they've really had the opportunity to kind of design their own path this year. Sure?
So the math?
Yes.
Is that K6?
Math, so illustrative math is K5. K5, Jeff? K5. And then 6th grade is currently So they've had a pilot of a program called Desmos at the middle school level, and they found some success with that. So there are ongoing conversations about what sixth grade looks like because it's still attached down here. That's something that's still kind of under review, but hoping, again, if we're going to have that solid tier 1 foundation, hoping to have some answers in the next several months about that.
I will say, just to add on to that, they're programs that are related to each other as well. So Desmos and IM have actually worked very closely together. In fact, there's some notations in the Desmos program that thanks illustrative math for some of the work. They are sort of siblings, I would say. How's that? That's a way to describe that. So again, it helps with that bridge. And the conversation right now with sixth grade is, do we align K-5? Or do we start to prepare kids for that transition while they're still in this building? The lean right now is starting to prepare kids for that transition.
All right. One of the highlights for tiers 2 and 3, so what we do for groups of students and what we do for students individually, happened very recently at our elementary school. We had both math and reading data days, data discussions between our interventionists and our classroom teachers. So if you saw our MTSS presentation last year, we talked about a partnership with the University of Minnesota and how we discussed data and using some established protocols. We continued to use those protocols, but also refine them to make more sense for us this year. So during these data discussions, interventionists and grade level teachers sat down and they talked about students who were currently receiving intervention and what their next steps for instruction might be. So that could go a couple of different ways. Can you click, Nick? And one more time. So they had the opportunity to talk for 40 minutes, about their students. And what resulted was pretty interesting in my opinion. Intervention, receiving support from a reading teacher or a math teacher should not be what we say, like, it's not a life sentence. It's not something that should go on forever because in theory, the intervention is helping you catch up, right? So during these conversations, what we were actually able to do is after our reading conversations, we released 29 students out of intervention because they were back on grade level. And we made 25 switches in reading. So what that means is they either mastered a topic and still needed more intervention, so maybe went to somebody else, or they needed an additional level of intervention and they went to somebody else, or we scaled back their intervention. You can go a couple of different ways, but really the point is that our teachers and interventionists were having these discussions about students and what was best for them next step with instruction. You'll see the same for math over there. We did take on new students. Those aren't represented up here. We did take on new students because you can't release a whole bunch of kids and just expect that we don't have other needs. But to me, this just speaks so highly of our staff's collegial conversations that they had and their ability to make decisions together based on what was best for their students.
Margot?
Yes.
I just wanted to add one thing. It's rare to see students get released. Sometimes students come in and students never cycle out. So to see a healthy number of students released, I think is fantastic.
Yeah.
So like, are you kind of exploring like a time frame to do that? Or, you know what I'm saying?
To cycle back through and do it again?
Yeah, like would you just do that mid-year? Would you do that a couple times a year? Like are you exploring that?
Yeah. So yes, ideally you do it cyclically throughout the year, maybe 3 times a year, 4 times a year. We don't have a date set for the next time that we're going to look at this, but we will be looking at student data in a formalized way before the end of the year. We did this same sort of, a variation of this process when we formed our original groups that started at the start of the year, using data, making decisions about instructional focuses. And it's interesting because we do a benchmark at the end of the year. So in theory, we're prepared to begin in September, knowing what our students know, but we always have to account for that like summer slide as well. So yeah, it's definitely a practice that's getting more shored up as we go through it. Thanks, Nick. And then I would argue that this is the biggest sort of impact / focus of MTSS this year. This is attendance. So you'll note at the top it's for tiers 1, 2, and 3 because attendance is something that we deal with for all students, but we also have different responses depending on your level of absence and the reasons. Nick, could you click again? Both buildings had goals around developing a system to track and intervene when attendance concerns popped up. So this has been an ongoing process. So we started out needing to clarify our coding procedures, working with our nurses and making sure that we're all on the same sort of communication level about how we code an absence in our system, that sort of thing. We are now reviewing attendance at regular intervals and making decisions about interventions based on those discussions. Currently, some of our interventions are letters home, phone calls from our pupil support office staff or our administrators. We've done some home visits this year. We are looking this year to solidify what more can we do in school to support students, because a lot of those options that I just mentioned are like related to home. But in a minute, I'll talk to you about two interventions that we're working on to help support students in school as well. Okay, we're gonna switch over to talking about our social, emotional, and behavioral progress this year. And I'm gonna start with Tier 1. Both buildings in their plans for excellence identified that they really wanted to increase opportunities for student voice and participation in clubs. We are proud to offer our Eagle Ambassador clubs at both the secondary school and the elementary school this year. These are students who, over 20 kids at both buildings, they provide input and feedback about our Tier 1 work. So what are some goals that we should work for? What type of celebrations would you like to see?